Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first stream of the new year 2021. Happy New Year to everybody. I think I speak for everybody when I say that this year needs to be better, and it will be better. I'm going in with a positive attitude, and I'm here today to talk about 2021 gear, things we want to see, and it's my pleasure to be joined by Cameron O'Connell. Cameron, how you doing?
Hey Jack, how you doing?
Oh, sorry, 1 second. Let me just fix my audio.
Yeah, no worries. I just did the exact same thing.
The AirPods are playing up. Okay, speak again, sorry. Yeah, that's better. That's
Hello,
cool.
mate. All good?
Cool. Yeah, so do you want to just introduce yourself and say a little bit about the work you do?
Yeah, so I'm Cameron. I am a UK-based cinematographer, video producer, and all-round content creator. I started in music production. I then found a love for photography. And then through photography, I found my way into video production. And to be honest, I'm still growing from this point, but I've been doing this freelance for about four years now. It's been my only source of income pretty much my entire time doing this. And yeah, that's kind of a look or a taste of what I do.
I think I was on mute. Yeah, thanks for joining us. So just to introduce what we're talking about today, 2020, I think you can agree, Cameron, has just been a crazy year for a lot of reasons. So obviously the global pandemic has been a massive thing, but for cameras, it's also been a crazy year. So we've had big announcements like the C300 Mark III, the Canon C70, the Sony FX6, and the Sony A7S III, Red Komodo. It's just been insane for cameras. So I feel like, I don't know if you can say a little bit about this as well, but I feel like 2020 has already been an incredible year for video gear. Is that kind of your takeaway as well?
Yeah, I mean, it really has. I think it's kind of ironic that we've been given all these tools this year and we've got no projects to shoot, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've kind of been looking at all the releases coming out and just thinking, I want that, I want that, I want that. But like having nothing to finance it is kind of a big thing. But do you want
No,
to just
yeah,
say
that's
quick?
it.
Do you want to just quickly say maybe like your highlight of 2020 before we move on to 2021?
Do you mean my highlight in general or in cameras?
In terms of like gear or any video tools that have been released this year.
Well, I guess for me, this year it would have been the 1DX Mark III. So I've got this bad boy here. Um, I mean, anyone who has ever stumbled across my channel knows that the Canon 1D is has always been my baby, and I've shot on pretty much every generation of the 1D since the 1DC, which was released in 2012. They've certainly got their problems, and they are not right for everyone. But yeah, as of right now, I think the 1DX3 has probably been my favorite camera of the year. But again, it has its issues, and that's why I'm pretty much going to replace it in the next couple of weeks.
Cool. So what are you thinking to replace it with?
Um, well, so I mean, Canon have been throwing me on a bit of a roller coaster with releases this year. In that I shot on the 1DX2 for like a good 3 years, I'd say, maybe two and a bit. Um, Rumors of the R5 sort of came out, and I was ready to move. I was sick of the 1DX2, and I was ready to move to the R5. Um, they marketed the R5 as like a pro video camera, which is so rare for Canon to kind of cannibalize their cinema line. But then, yeah, as the release came, all the rumors of the overheating were starting to circulate, and I just got so sick of it and ended up buying C200 instead, which was an incredible camera. And looking back on some of the footage, I did love it. Um, but pretty much, I just can't be happy with the camera. Doesn't matter what it is or what I need. For some reason, I always just need something more. But I
I
think
think
the R5 is it's going to be close as long as it doesn't overheat on me in most scenarios, or I can kind of plan my shoots around what it can and can't do, as well as it being probably one of the best stills cameras you can buy today. Um, yeah, basically in the next couple of weeks, I plan to replace the 1DX3 with the Canon R5 in hopes that it's right for me, or in hopes that Canon don't release something a few weeks later, which would be the perfect camera for me. But yeah, no, I mean, the 1DX3 has been great, and it's probably, yeah, it's been the highlight of this year for me. It was a massive upgrade from the 1DX2. Um, and in ways, it's still like the perfect camera for me, but Canon have just crippled this camera with so many issues, which uh, has told me it's time to let it go.
yeah, absolutely, and I think
But
that
yeah,
leads us nicely into moving into 2021 because, like you said, we've got cameras that are so perfect and really have everything we need, but we still want more. So, moving into 2021, let's look at first cameras and lenses. So, do you have any idea of kind of like it can be specific products, but also kind of trends that you'd like to see in cameras and lenses in 2021?
okay. So let me have a look at my notes quickly. Something I would really like to see in cameras this year would be tools for shooting portrait video. So this year I've been doing a lot of like social media content from home for brands, and they specifically ask for Instagram portrait crop. If I shoot a landscape video and I send it over, they'll either end up getting poor results because landscape video doesn't really do well on Instagram, or they'll end up cropping it and it will just look awful. So yeah, this year I think I've embraced portrait video a little more. I understand that obviously it has its place, and it has a place where it shouldn't be as well. But yeah, this year basically I've had to kind of create like my own crop markers on the 1D with electrical tape.
Hmm.
And yeah, I just think some tools for shooting portrait would be really great. And obviously the cage of the 1DX allows me to mount the camera portrait. Um, but no, yeah, I'd just like to see camera companies embrace portrait video. And the first I've kind of seen of that, I think, is in the new C70.
Yeah, I was about
I
to
don't know
mention
if you've
that.
seen that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so as of stock, they've got a tripod thread on the side of the camera so that you could mount the camera on a tripod or a gimbal to shoot portrait. And I don't know about the menus or any of the information on screen. I don't know if that flips with the
It does,
image.
yeah, it does.
It does. Okay.
Yeah, which is actually something that I thought was really, really kind of, especially on a cinema camera, because they've usually kind of, Canon has kind of steered away from trends in certain respects. So vertical video, seen them going all in, like you said, with the tripod plate on the side, as well as like the on-screen information flipping as well, which is I think is really cool. And yeah, I think vertical video is one of those things that you just need to get over yourself and learn how to do it because it's a necessity in our industry, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't like shooting portrait video. I'll never choose to shoot it optionally. But if the client's asking for it and it performs better on Instagram and Facebook, which is where the majority of my content goes, then I think it makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And also, leading on from that, before we go into more depth on kind of cameras, Mars Attack 69 just says, with the instability in our industry, do you think now is a good time to get a new camera? So I'll give you a break and I'll just put in my my 2 cents on that.
Yeah.
It really depends, because like we've said, a lot of the cameras we've got already do everything we need them to. The chances are, if you have a modern DSLR or mirrorless camera, it's going to do everything you need to do to create content and get paid for it. So that's basically in that kind of category. I include everything kind of 800 plus, let's say, 800 plus with an interchangeable lens. You're pretty much set to do kind of photography or video work. And so even if you don't want to buy a new camera, buying a used camera from a few years ago is also a really good option. So like Cameron said, he recently got the C200, which was released in 2017. I also recently got the C200 and sold it. But yeah, buying an old camera is a really good option. I've got a friend who works in a fairly big production company, and he said that his production company has recently bought the C300 Mark IIs because the C200 Mark IIIs have come out and brought down the price. So yeah, I don't think, if your current camera is doing everything you need to, I don't think there's any need to upgrade. And if you do want to upgrade, going for a camera that's a little bit older is also a good option. But what are your thoughts, Cameron?
Yeah, what you were saying about buying used gear is quite interesting. Because the way I've always kind of seen it is that if you're buying something used, you can essentially rent it for free. At least that's the way I've done it in the past. So I very rarely rent anything, to be honest, because yeah, if the job needed something specific, I can end up buying the camera and often flipping it for more. I make quite a fair amount of profit out of the used cameras that I buy, if you're smart about it. But yeah, in terms of the question, so with the instability of our industry, do you think now is a good time to get a new camera? It depends. Like if you're busy and you're making money from a tool, then if that new camera is that one thing that gets you up in the morning and allows, makes you enjoy your job, or if it saves you time, or it improves something in your workflow that the client or yourself can have value in, then absolutely, I think, there's no kind of, I don't think with the status of the pandemic right now, anything is going to get better anytime soon. So yeah, and it also depends, like what kind of level of camera are we talking? Because I would probably advise you not to buy a 20,000-30,000 pound red camera right now, not unless you had clients that were willing to pay you the big bucks to use it and own it and rent it out. But if it's like a cheap, affordable DSLR or mirrorless camera, or even like a used cinema camera, I think, be smart. Like, look at what's around the corner. Look at how the camera's value might drop as well. Like I just keep an eye on what rumors there are, what may or may not be coming out, and kind of have a prediction on when something may lose its value. I've been wrong about that in the past as well. Like my 1DX2, I sold that because I thought the R5 and the R6 was going to make the 1DX2 completely obsolete. And in my opinion, it is to most people. But for some reason, that camera still sells for what I sold it for 6 or 7 months ago. So yeah, don't be afraid to buy a camera. I think you have to own a camera to really get the most out of it. Because yeah, if you're renting or borrowing, you won't get the hours behind the camera to really really get the most of it.
Absolutely. So I hope that answers your question, Mars Attacks. In terms of what I'm looking for in cameras and lenses, number one is no record limits of any kind, because there's a few cameras that came out with record limits in 2020, and they had like really nice features, but for me, like, and for a lot of videographers, they're shooting a lot of interviews. So you just want to be able to press record and know that it captures everything. So that's one of the things. 8K without compromises would be great. Like, because the R5, that 8K is absolutely beautiful, and the downsampled 4K is beautiful. But there's limits on that, like, understandably, because it's a stills kind of inspired body, so heat is an issue. But 8K without compromise would be great, just because it gives us the ability to crop in, it gives us the ability to get that beautiful oversampled 4K. And also in terms of lenses, on the Sony side, there's a rumored 70-200 Sigma f2.8 lens, and I own their 24-70 f2.8, and it's absolutely brilliant. So if we could get like a sister lens to that, that'd be absolutely great. Cameron, do you have any kind of lens wishes that you'd like in 2021 before we move on to lighting?
So I've always been Canon EF lens guy. I've always liked the Canon EF lineup because there's so much out there. Pretty much every lens manufacturer makes a lens for it. But I've gotten to the point where I'm ready to move into the new RF lenses because they are super sharp. Most of them have IS. Most of them are just better in pretty much every way. But yeah,
that 28 to 70 lens looks incredible. You know, the f2 one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that lens would be a bit big for me. I'm into kind of smaller, more shallower lenses. I hate like protruding lenses because the weight of where you're holding a body, it just like pulls you down as the lens protrudes out, if you get what I mean. So yeah, I'm really interested to see what Sigma do next, because Sigma lenses have always been, in my opinion, the best value for money for performance.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically the 18-35, that's been a lens that pretty much everyone has always loved. So I'd like to see a full frame 18-35, or even a 16-35 like f2 from Sigma. I know that would be big, but sometimes I think 2.8 is just a bit too slow for me, or it's not like a fun lens. So I think, yeah, if Sigma, if they could make a 16-35 f2, I would love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sigma have really been the disruptor in terms of lenses for all systems lately. Like you said, they came out with the 18-35. That was 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And that's been incredible for crop sensor cameras. Like you said, the RF 28-70. But yeah, I think Sigma is going to be the one to do it, because they seem to be the ones that are willing to take those risks in terms of creating, like the 18-35. No one had ever created a zoom lens that was that sharp before, so they're willing to take those risks. They're willing to kind of push the boat out, and in terms of affordability, they're incredible, right? So like the standard zoom for Sony E-mount is about £1,000, $1,000, roughly that. And if you went for the Sony option, it would cost like twice that much, and the performance difference is negligible, really. And I know they do some similar art lenses for the EF mount, right?
Yeah, that's right. They do them for Sony as well, but they're essentially just
converted
an EF lens with a converter inside it. Yeah. But yeah,
So,
Canon have got some interesting lenses supposedly rumored coming up. I've heard stories of like a 14-25 f1.4 coming.
That would be insane.
Like what does 14 mil at f1.4 look like? Because that
Just
I just
yeah.
can't imagine like it's almost too much light, isn't it? Like
I
nothing
mean,
would
I
be
mean,
in focus.
the only thing that comes to mind was roughly comparable, even though it's not nearly as wide, is the Sony 24mm 1.4, which is an incredible look because it's fairly wide, but it kind of gives you that isolation, so it looks insane. But yeah, 14 millimeters at 1.4. I'd be interested to see that.
I mean, I used to have the Sigma 1418,
Okay.
and it was incredible, but it's literally like a kilo. It weighs a kilogram. So like putting that on any body, I mean, the 1DX was a great camera for it, but if you put that on a mirrorless body, you would literally need to hold the lens and not the camera. It wouldn't really work. But
Absolutely.
yeah, but like ideas for lenses. Personally, I think we just need faster, smaller, cheaper, more shallow in like length. Um, and I think as cinema cameras now are embracing autofocus, it would be good to get lenses that have virtually silent motors. Because while most people are using stills lenses for video these days, um, I have noticed that if you have like an onboard mic on the camera, some lenses like the actual the motors inside the lens can be picked up in camera. You ever had that issue?
Yeah, I know that it was an issue on some of the EF lenses. You had to be careful which ones you got, and it's quite weird because the stepping motor lenses are the more modern ones, and they're not as bad. So the Nifty 50, the newer one, it has the newer stepping motor. But the problem is a lot of those lenses were kind of stills first, so they did have like
Yeah.
the USM focusing motor, which was really good and instant for stills, but it was really noisy. So yeah, agreed. Like anything that kind of makes them quieter. And just going back to a point you made just now, like in terms of, because the 70 to 200 on the RF is really small, right? It's tiny little lens for a 70 to 200. So if they can continue that trend to kind of more RF lenses they bring out this year, then that'd be great. But I think I'm going to move
Yeah,
us on
for
to
sure.
lighting
Okay.
so we can keep it going.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
yeah, I'm going to throw it over to you for this one. What are the things you're kind of looking for in lighting in 2021? We've already had 2020, which has been an incredible year. There's been lots of exciting products announced. Aperture's brought out that new Amaran range, which is basically the same performance as their bigger, more expensive lights, but in a slightly cheaper package without like a carry case, but still with really good performance. So in terms of looking forward to 2021, what are the things you're looking for in your lighting?
So, like, ashamedly, I have a fair amount or a fair lack of experience in lighting, and my knowledge and skills is still growing. And it's something that I've definitely put a bit of work into this year, and it's something I'm going to be putting more work into. Um, but yeah, I would say I think Aperture's range have really smashed it. I think the price point is just it's out of reach for most people. Um, Something like the 120D. The 120D is a great starter light, supposedly, but I could never justify it. It's like £1,000, um, and there are sort of knockoffs that have come around that I think anyway pretty much do the same job. Like I recently got this new. It's called a like a Gembi EF2 something. Um, and the build quality of this light is terrible. Like it has a Bowens mount, but you couldn't. It's like plastic and tacky and horrible. But
Yeah.
it was £130, and it can take Sony MP style batteries. And compare that, and yeah, okay, so 130 quid and then a couple of batteries. Compare that to the 120D, which takes Velox. So I still don't own a car, right? So I can't be carrying around big, heavy things on jobs. And like if I'm doing jobs in London, even if I were to buy a car, um, I'd have to carry or hire a team just to carry like a briefcase full of Vlogs, right? It depends on the job, but yeah, I think we just need cheaper, smaller, and especially the ability to use battery powered with these lights. Yeah, and then yeah, I like the idea of portability, because if it means that I don't need AC power when I'm outside or I'm in a space where I haven't got it, that's really important to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think definitely having, because like you said, I run most of my kit on the Sony NPF batteries as well, which are a lot smaller than the V-mount batteries, if people don't know. So yeah, it's interesting you said about aperture, because like the newest Amaran range is basically geared at like people like yourselves and me, basically, that want the performance of the bigger aperture lights, but in a cheaper package. So I think the new one they brought out was the 100, is it 100D? And it's basically the power of a 120D, but it's like,
Yep.
I think it's like £150, £200, which is insane. So they've kind of
Okay.
yeah, and they've done the same thing with the 300D. So they've brought out 300 something, which is basically like the 300D, but in like a plastic packaging rather than the metal body of the 300D, and that is like 350. So again, like a third of the price of the bigger lights. So I mean, they were announced in this year, but I think they're coming out in 2021, so I'll probably count them as a 2021 product. But yeah, like looking at products like that is like one of the things that I'm looking for. And also I really like the Aputure Light Dome, and I know, Cameron, you've got a similar one that basically does the same thing, but for me it's not quite big enough. So at the moment I'm shooting and it's kind of just out of shot here, and it's fairly soft. But if I wanted to, this is quite a tight framing, so if I wanted to kind of back things up and, you know, light a bigger space, or, you know, show more of the environment, then really you need a light with a bigger modifier. So my basically what I'm looking for in 2021 is a Light Dome 2, but bigger. So like I think they're 90 centimeters at the moment. But like if they could give us that in like 120 centimeters, 150 centimeters, that would be amazing for me. So that's one of the big things I'm looking for in 2021.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the modifiers really do make a difference. I'll tell you one thing that really bugged me about the Aputure, the Light Dome, the modifier you've got. I could be wrong, but do you not have to like disassemble it every time by pulling like the rods out every time?
No, on the Mark ones you did, but the
Okay.
Mark II ones, they kind of got rid of that, which is so annoying, because I've got like an older Godox one, which with the rods you have to put in. Oh man, it takes like half an hour to put up sometimes. And if
That's
you're
it,
like
I mean,
if you're in front of
yeah.
the client and you're like sweating trying to get these rods in, it's a nightmare. So yeah, I'm with you on that one.
That's it. I mean, I don't know if it's just me or I'm lazy, but if I have to be assembling a light dome like that every single time, the chances are I'm just not going to use it. Like I've seen some of the umbrella style ones. Have you ever seen them?
Yeah.
They're like they have like a little clip in the middle, so you can pop them down into a bag. So yeah, I think maybe something like that in the light dome size, because I think you're limited on how big you can get with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what would also be really cool that I think Aputure could work on. I think it probably is in the next version of their lights, but my brother bought me have you heard of the Aputure MC?
Yeah, they're actually
like
they're actually lighting my little accent on my laptop here.
Oh, brilliant. Cool. Yeah. So my brother bought me one of them for Christmas, and
Love them. What are your thoughts on them?
I've not really used it on a shoot yet, but I do love the idea that you can control it through an app. And I really love the idea that you can sample a color using the camera on your phone, and then the light will match that color.
Yeah, it's
Maybe
absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Maybe something like that with with something more powerful like an Aperture 120D.
Yeah, because they've got the Aperture Nova, haven't they? Which is like their really big RGB LED, which is basically like a huge version of the MC. But yeah, I think if they could bring like the technology inside of the MC, so like the RGB controlled via an app, if they could bring it into like a package that was like mid-size, so like that maybe rather than like that, because I think, I don't know what your thoughts are, but for me, like the MC, it's really good, but it's a little bit too small, and with a smaller light you're going to have a smaller battery. So if they could just kind of like maybe even just double the size of the MC, and then the battery would get bigger and you get slightly more light, I think that would be really good. So like a mid-size kind of RGB light would be great.
Yeah, I like the idea of that. Maybe they could make a way of like daisy chaining the MCs together so that they all correspond to one change in the app.
Well, you can do that. So you can group at the moment you can group lights together. So at the moment these two, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, this is like a daylight here, and then on this side is like a warm light. But you can group them together. So you could have like 10 MCs in one group, or you can control them individually. So they already offer that, but like you've still got to set up multiple lights, which is more work, right? So if you could just have one more powerful light, then maybe that would be cool.
Okay, yeah, sounds like they beat us to it.
I've got a question again from Mars Attacks. If you could add one thing to your lighting kit for the next year, what would you go for? Do you have any thoughts on that, Cameron?
Well, I think the MC we just spoke about, the Aperture MC, that's definitely something kind of cheap and fun and useful to use. I mean, I don't think I'll be lighting subjects with the MC all that often, not unless it's like a
No.
really small room. But I do really like the idea of using it as a practical light. So I can leave it in the corner of a room or behind a product or inside something that would illuminate light from it. Yeah, I think that would be a good little addition. Um,
Yeah, I think I'd
you think
agree
of
with you.
anything else?
Like, no, I think I agree with you. Like, it's a 2020 product, but I think it's still like a really good recommend for 2021, especially because it's like £100, I think, or maybe a little bit cheaper. It's actually cheaper in America, I think, but it's around £100, $100, and you get so much in that package. And like you said, using it as like a practical has been really powerful. So recently, I did like an interview setup, and the subject had like a really nice warm lamp, similar to this, but we had the lamp in shot, and I was basically able to just kind of sample that lamp behind her. And push it into the MCs. So it was following that color temperature and making it look like it was motivated from the practical, which is I haven't done it here. I'm kind of evolving my lighting setup. I need to get something over here, something practical to make it look like it's coming from there, like a warm lamp or something. But you're always looking to kind of make your light look motivated. So yeah, in terms of using it as an accent, a hair light, and matching existing sources, I think that's really good. So yeah, I definitely would recommend that because it's so small as well. You can just chuck it in your gear bag, always have it there, and you've got like such a versatile RGB light. We've got another question from Shreya, who, so this is slightly different, but similarity. So for someone starting out in 2021, what light would you suggest to begin with? So in terms of a light, I guess that's versatile and can be used for like a number of situations. Do you have anything that you would recommend, Cameron?
Um, the sun.
It's
I
free,
mean,
yeah.
yeah. I joke, but to be honest, the best results I ever get in camera is natural sunlight. So yeah, I mean, start by using sunlight, I think, to begin with. But yeah, if you're shooting indoors or you want to be able to control your light, I think the Gordox SL60W is about £99, and yeah, it's like the 120D sort of knockoff on Amazon. I think that is a cheap, affordable amazing light to start with. It's what I still use. I can't really fault it, other than
Yeah,
the fact that
same.
you can't power it by batteries. And then if you think you would like to power it by batteries, yeah, look up the Gembi EF 60W, I think it's called, and that takes the two Sony style batteries in the top. But I think either of them are pretty much the same light. Maybe even get two of them, because and then maybe some soft boxes, some cheap soft boxes. I think that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, I just kind of that's the light that comes into my mind whenever people are looking for, a starter light because, like you said, it's so cheap. You can do a lot with it. It's a hard light out of the box, so you can kind of use it to create shadows and things like that. I've used it in my background here, so I've just put the reflector on and then put some tape over the reflector to make it look like it's kind of window blinds. So you can use it
Okay.
as a hard light with that, or you can also Cameron I think is being lit with it at the moment as his key light, so you can use it as a soft light as well, which looks great on people. So like interviews, anything like that. So yeah, I think it's a perfect starter light. It's £100, $100. Get a cheap softbox and you'll be laughing. So yeah, I'm just going to wrap up the lighting segment by just saying that as I kind of learned more about lighting and in lockdown, that's kind of been what I've been focusing a lot of my attention on. So in setting up kind of live streams and videos like this, I've been experimenting with different types of lighting. And I've really liked using kind of big diffusion frames. So you can get them on Amazon. They're really cheap. They're just kind of like a metal frame, and then you put kind of diffusion material over them. But there's like a gap in the market at the moment because you can either get really cheap, like rickety ones that you could use at home, but I wouldn't recommend using them out on a job, or you get kind of like the really expensive ones that are like hundreds of pounds. So I really think there's a gap in the market for someone to create really good kind of sturdy diffusion frames and diffusion fabric. Maybe like an Aperture or Godox could do it, something that you can kind of tear down and put in your bag, but you can kind of like get out really quickly, because big diffusion frames are great because if you get a big diffusion frame near to your talent, it basically looks like they're being lit by window light. And like Cameron said, if you can get window light or like emulate the look of it, then that's going to be the best look you're going to get, because the human eye is used to seeing kind of things lit by daylight, and it looks natural to them. So I think, yeah, cheap diffusion frames would be great in terms of lighting. So
Yeah, no,
next,
that sounds great.
let's move on to audio. So yeah, audio. I think audio is a really good investment for money. It's similar to lighting because if you get a camera, it ages quite badly. So like you said, you should marry your lenses and date your camera bodies, like people say. So like lenses will last a long time, lighting will last a long time, and I think audio as well, because you get a good mic. I mean, people are still using what's the Sennheiser? Is it I forget the name, 416, isn't it? That old one.
I've
Do you
heard
know
of it. Yeah, yeah. I think the four something,
Yeah, the
the shotgun
416 or
mic.
something. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's from like decades ago, and people are still swear by it as like that. It sounds really great on a lot of voices. So yeah, lighting and audio is something that are really good investments because they'll last you for a long time. So like you said, I've got the 300D Mark II, and I can see that lasting me for 10, 20 years, maybe even more. So yeah. So audio is an interesting one because there's already so many great options out there in terms of good shotgun mics for audio and things like that, and audio recorders. But I'm wondering, Cameron, if you have anything that you're looking for that's not on offer at the moment in audio.
Um, you say on offer, do you just mean something that doesn't exist? Is that what you mean?
Something doesn't exist, or something that does exist, but it's at a price point at the moment that's kind of unattainable for most people.
Um, well, I think the problem is that with kind of cheaper cameras, you know, if it's a camera that's not a C100, 200, 300, 400, or cinema level camera, the audio is pretty poor in like DSLR and mirrorless cameras. So there's only so much control you can get. But I recently picked up Sound Devices Mix 3, and they just released the Mark II version, which I got the Mark One version, but the Mark II version has the new 32-bit float. So I mean, I'll be interested to see what that's like, because it means you could, in theory, shoot an interview and pretty much never clip your channel. Which, I mean, it's a bit lazy as a filmmaker, but if that it gives you that reassurance, I think that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what I'm missing in audio. I think the secret for good audio is just to get a quiet room, or an isolated sound source, and a good mic and recorder as close to the sound source as possible. So I think any way that you can hide mics or have them off camera or anything like that, I'll always recommend to someone. Like, for example, I know they're not really like pro audio, but I picked up the Rode Wireless Go's this year, and they sound good. They sound good enough, I think, and it just makes getting like lapels on and off of subjects, or wirelessly getting audio from a sound source so much easier. So I think it'd be cool if they, like, for example, with the Wireless Go's and the Rode Filmmaker Kit as well. I don't know if you've ever used the Filmmaker Kit. You ever use that?
That's the kind of like the entry level option they offer with the on camera bit, and then it's got like the receiver as well, isn't it? But it's like a body pack. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. But something that always upset me about them and any kind of wireless audio pack out there is that you can't like assign, or you can't connect multiple mics to one receiver. Do you get what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, so I was always like, there's like 9 different channels on these wireless mics, but you can only have one set per receiver. So if you wanted to have multiple sound sources, say like you're recording like a panel, or an interview with more than one person, then you need 2 receivers and essentially 2 inputs from a recorder. So I'd like to see something like that from Rode, I think. Yeah, I mean, audio is a funny one. Like you said, it doesn't really change. So yeah, investing in good audio gear is something you should probably do before a good camera, but no filmmaker ever does, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's that age-old thing, isn't it? We all love kind of talking about camera gear and obsessing over lenses and stuff like that, but actually investing in lighting in audio is actually more important. Because I think I remarked before we went on the stream, like I just said, Cameron's lighting looks really nice and the camera looks really nice. I said, what are you shooting on? And he was just saying, oh, I'm just shooting on an iPhone. But because he's lit it nicely and, he's thought about his composition and framing and stuff like that, that's what really matters, really. Like, so you can get away with using entry level stuff, or even like a camera phone, if you know how to light, you know how to kind of compose a shot. So I think there's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But going back to wireless mics, yeah, I know the Rode Filmmaker Kit and the Rode Wireless Go's are like entry level. But I mean, I've had a go on some of the more pro, like Sennheiser receivers and senders, and they are great, but I just find they're a bit too much hassle for what I need. They take like, they have like poor battery life. I think it's more of an industry thing than kind of a solo one-man band, camera operator. I think the entry level stuff can actually work out better sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware of the Pico mic. Have you seen those before?
The Pico mic. No, I've not.
So it's basically like a little mic system, but like you said, you can put two you can it's a wireless mic, and it's basically got these little ones that you just kind of clip onto your talent like that and
Oh,
leave it
brilliant.
there. But like both there's two mics on there. I don't know if you can see in the light. There's two mics on there, and they both
Right.
link to the same input. So effectively, it's like a mixer for two mics.
Okay.
So it's really cool, and you just kind of like, yeah, you stick it on top of your camera, and for interviews it's really great just because you can kind of like one of them sent to the left channel, one of them sent to the right, so you can just kind of have an interview setup like that. It's really cool.
No, yeah, brilliant. No, I mean they look similar to those new Zoom recorders. I forget the name of it, but there's a new Zoom recorder that also has the 32-bit float.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I can't remember the name of it though.
There's like loads of memes on Facebook about it at the minute because everyone's like losing their mind over it. But
Oh really? What's the? Give me the lowdown.
I can't remember, but it's just like yeah, people just like taking the piss out of people asking about it because it's sort of become like a cliche thing that every like wedding filmmaker needs this 32-bit float audio recorder, when in reality they really don't.
This is the thing, isn't it? Because a lot of the time people get wrapped up with these exciting new stuff that's being announced on products, but they don't realize that, for decades people have been managing with what came before. So with like 24-bit audio is fine, really, because like, I mean, like once or twice I've had clipped audio issues, but it was my fault because I wasn't kind of like on it enough, really. So as long as you pay attention to your levels and you kind of make sure that stuff's not, going above -12, -6 or whatever, then you don't need it. But like you said, it would be a nice to have, just, if that 32-bit float, was like across the industry. So even on the cheap recorders, having that, and, you can still set your levels right and things like that, because, you're still going to get noise. So people don't realize that with 32-bit float. So it's 32-bit float, so you've got more range for the audio to kind of not clip. But even if you've got 32-bit float and you set your levels too low, then you're going to have to bring them up anyway, and you're going to get noise. So you get the same issues, really. It just means you've got more kind of headroom.
Yeah, no, I'm sure as 32-bit float becomes like a standard, like you said, even in cheaper audio gear, um, we'll laugh that we ever recorded anything else. But I'll tell you another feature I remembered that I'd probably add to something like the wireless goes or any kind of wireless mics. Um, I forget who did it, but there was a company that would do. It was basically a system where it would wirelessly send the audio signal to your camera, but then you could also add a micro SD card into the mic. You ever seen
Oh
that?
yeah, yeah. It was. I do know the name. I just forgot it.
I think it might have been
Deity. It was
Zoom.
Deity.
Oh, is it Deity? Yeah, because
Yeah,
they're doing some good mics these days, aren't they?
yeah. So that one's really amazing because it's got like you said, like the XLR port on it, and you can literally put it on the end of a boom pole without any cables kind of going to record or anything, because it's got that SD card built in. So, I mean, that's got to be. I'm not a sound operator, but for sound operators, that's got to be massive, surely. Not having the cameras, sorry, not having the cables and the extra weight, just having everything kind of integrated into one thing, really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. But no, yeah, with wireless mics, I guess the risk is always that there can be some form of interruption in the signal, which does happen. Like with the cheaper wireless goes or the Filmmaker wireless kit, it uses like a Wi-Fi connection. And I was to think if I tried to use that at like a live show or an event, I imagine the image or the the signal would fall apart pretty quick. So I think if there was the ability to record on board locally as well as a backup, I think that would be an amazing feature for cheaper wireless mics.
Yeah, definitely having that kind of insurance backup. I think because I always like to do that on cameras if I can, have them both recording, even though touch wood, I've never had a SD card fail on me. But you know, having that dual kind of recording is really good, especially with like wireless interference, because especially like there's a million kind of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth devices, like people's phones in the room in events, like you said. So there's so many opportunities for it to fail. So yeah, having that backup would be massive.
Yeah, and I'm
So
sure even the more expensive radio mics that use like actual proper frequencies, I bet they still run into interruption all the time.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's just like a limitation of using wireless signals. I think unless someone brings out some new kind of standard that gets around that, but for now, I think that's kind of just something that we're going to have to deal with. So
Yeah,
moving on
no, I
to
agree.
editing and software predictions. This is going to be our last segment. So if you have any final questions, please drop them below. If you'd like to hear us talk about anything in 2021, or if you have any favorite, specs or capabilities you'd like to see added to video gear in 2021, leave it below. But we're going to move on to editing and software. So yeah, there's been a lot of software at the moment is quite interesting because most software packages provide, everything you need to edit and color and things like that. But I think certain programs do it better. So in terms of like, what kind of software are you using, Cameron, and what do you feel the limitations are at the moment that you think could be kind of overcome in 2021?
So I'm shooting in Premiere Pro. I have always shot in Premiere Pro, and to be honest, the reason I'm still shooting in Premiere Pro is because I really just don't want to have to learn a new piece of software. I I know Final Cut, like pretty much anyone can get their head around Final Cut, but it's just like some tasks I would find might take a bit longer because I'm not as proficient in Final Cut. But yeah, Premiere Pro is plagued with issues, if I'm honest, because, well, especially as a Mac user, I don't think Premiere Pro has ever really been properly optimized for the hardware. And it upsets me that there's no communication from camera developers to laptop developers or computer developers with Adobe or anyone like that. I mean, the reason Final Cut is so proficient is because obviously, Apple make their own hardware and their own software. So I'd really like to see Premiere Pro um, putting more effort into performance, because honestly, I sometimes have to wait like 2-3 hours for a render out of Premiere Pro, and that's not good.
Yeah, in terms of crashing as well, because I started on Premiere, I learned how to edit on Premiere, and I just kind of got used to it crashing regularly, and I just thought that was something that video software did because of like the fact that it was using a lot of processor, a lot of graphics, and those things fail sometimes. But it wasn't until I kind of switched to Final Cut, and despite what people say, it does still crash, but it's very rare. So I think, like you said, yeah, software in general becoming more stable, because I think the problem with Adobe and Premiere, because they're on a subscription model, they feel under pressure to bring kind of like new features all the time. So they feel under pressure to justify that subscription model and bring those kind of flashy new features that they can advertise to bring in new subscribers and retain the subscribers they've got. But I think if they did just focus more on stability and making sure the software kind of performs as expected and doesn't crash, I think that would be a big selling point as well. I don't know if you've had much, because I know Premiere's improved in terms of stability, right? But does it still kind of crash like it used to?
It's come a long way. Like back in the day, it was just the wildest piece of software and would do whatever you wanted. Well, it would do whatever it wanted to. It's gotten better. I don't so much have problems with stability, but it's just timeline performance. Like if you're shooting any kind of codec that's at all difficult to edit, or anything that's a high resolution, or Um, Premiere Pro also struggles with adjustment layers. You add an adjustment layer over the top of something, change the opacity or something like that. It then has to re-render every single frame below that adjustment layer. And for some reason, it just takes hours, and I have no idea why. But yeah, pretty much. I'm quite happy with Premiere as the tools that they offer. As such, I just want better performance. I want, when I click play on the timeline, I need it to just play.
No, 100%. I think that's another thing that made me switch to Final Cut, is just kind of like the performance, especially if you're dealing with, you know, anything kind of 4K, especially if you're looking at kind of more compressed footage, then it really struggles with that as well. But I think in terms of like, I think hardware is going to play a big role that it hasn't done for a while, I think, because if we're looking forward at this year, Apple announced the new M1 Max. So if you don't know, Apple has always run their machines off Intel processors like Windows laptops have. But recently, Apple has announced laptops using their own processors, which means similar to kind of like the iPad and the iPhone, they can control everything about the software, the hardware, which means that it all works together and works really well, and you get like massive improvements in performance that you wouldn't get if they were using Intel processors. So Apple's announced the first kind of like entry level Macs. So you've got the Mac Mini, the MacBook Air, and one more I'm forgetting, the MacBook Pro 13-inch. And I mean, I've got the 16-inch MacBook Pro in front of me, and it's what I use to edit. It was the fastest Mac I could possibly get at the time, and that was earlier this year. And then Apple announced these new entry-level Macs, which are blazingly fast, and for certain tasks, they can beat out my top spec 16-inch MacBook Pro. So in terms of 2021, Apple's going to be kind of bringing out more of their performance-based Macs, so like the iMac, maybe like a MacBook Pro 16-inch. So Cameron, how do you think that kind of, with the context of them kind of redefining what you could do in a small package, so like the MacBook Air is kind of like really great performance. So in terms of like them coming out of the iMac and the MacBook Pro 16-inch, how do you think that could kind of change the way we work?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited for the M1 Max because as a Canon user, Canon shooter, the new H.265 codec is literally impossible to edit. It doesn't matter if you've got a supercomputer or a MacBook Pro, it will not play back. It's a heavily compressed codec that requires decoding, which is a task that isn't really suitable for the CPU. I don't really know too much about codecs or, you know, how the editing software has to deal with it. But I have heard on the new M1 computers, there's a dedicated chip to handling the decode of the video. Mm-hmm. So in theory, it should just be flawless playback for more complicated codecs. But I'd be intrigued to know how it will still work with Premiere, because while I totally believe that Final Cut will be pretty flawless on the new M1 Max, I'm skeptical that Adobe will optimize their software correctly for these laptops, at least not in the early days anyway. But
yeah, absolutely. I think they brought out the M1 beta for Premiere Pro at the moment, so I haven't heard how the performance is, but yeah, I mean they're kind of working towards a stable M1 like Premiere, so it'll be really interesting, like you said, to see how it works on non-Apple software. And I mean, because like Premiere, like I love Final Cut and I use Final Cut, but Premiere is like probably the most widely used in terms of Like Hollywood's a bit different because they use Avid and stuff like that. But in terms of like small to mid-range stuff, I think Premiere is probably the most popular. So if stuff like Premiere and Resolve can kind of optimized for M1 Max, I think 2021 is going to be really exciting in terms of the performance you can get out of a small machine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very unlike Apple to cannibalize their higher end MacBooks with these cheap, affordable, entry level M1 chips. Yeah, and I think it's just really interesting that, as you were saying, like in theory, an £800 MacBook Air will outperform your £3,000 MacBook Pro, or even £20,000 Mac Pro. You know, the new Mac Pro that they brought out just a year or two ago.
Yeah, exactly, and especially for kind of like difficult H.265, like you said, the R5 footage. I've seen people, I think it's Max Yuriev's channel. He does some really good kind of head-to-heads on performances, and he said that he's like, yeah, like you said, his Mac Pro can't handle the R5 footage, but his Mac Mini with, 8 gigs of RAM can absolutely smoke through it. So yeah, they've kind of redefined what computers can do in terms of it's not all about raw specs anymore, I don't think.
No, absolutely, and it's all about real world performance. I don't care how much RAM my laptop has, I just need it to do what I ask it to, right?
Absolutely. And Max says, I had the 16-inch i9 and swapped it for the Mac Mini M1. Yeah, I mean, that's something I've kind of been wrestling with as well, because I've got the same one. I've got the 16-inch i9. Sorry, my mind's gone blank. I've got the 16-inch i9 processor MacBook, and yeah, I mean, the Mac Mini would be ideal for me because I got the laptop thinking that I'd need to be traveling and working a lot, but that's not really happening at the moment, obviously. So I think the Mac Mini is a really interesting proposition because it's so cheap now. I think it's £800 it starts at. Could even be cheaper than that. That can edit, everything you need to at like £700, £800. Like all of a sudden, Macs that were typically kind of more expensive seem quite good value for money now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the minute Premiere Pro release a optimized, stable version for the M1 laptops or computers, I'm going to change. Absolutely. Although I'm a little skeptical because the new MacBook Pro. So I'm kind of a laptop guy. Like I get the idea of a desktop is better in so many ways, but I want one computer that I can bring on jobs. I can sort of move around the house and have an office on the go. So laptops are better suited for me. But the lack of USB ports on the new MacBook Pros is another reason I'm kind of skeptical as well, because I don't think 2 USBs is enough. At times I think even 4 USB ports on my current MacBook is not enough. So, I've got one port for charging and one port for everything else. I'm sure there are ways around it with adapters, but I think I'll at least wait a couple of months, see what Apple have got up their sleeve, because I'm hoping they can just release a 13 or 16-inch M1 computer with the 4 USBs. I think that's what I'm waiting for, really.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think 4 is the absolute minimum. Max says that he's heard that Adobe software runs better on Rosetta 2 than on Intel Macs. For the audience that don't know, Rosetta 2 is kind of like the emulation software that Apple is using to run Intel apps on their new architecture. And yeah, I have actually heard that stuff running in emulation on the new processors is often better performance than it was on Intel chips, which makes no sense because usually stuff running in emulation always runs slower. But yeah, like I said, the old rules don't make sense anymore. So
Yeah, I mean, I totally believe that the new M1 Max will outperform the Intel Max, even having to emulate the software. I don't think it's quite an emulation of such. It's more of just like it has to create a different version of the same app to run on the new Macs. But either way, if it works and it works, then yeah, I'm up for that.
100%. So yeah, Cameron, we've kept you for over an hour now, so we're going to let you shoot off. But thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your insights into 2021. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we finish?
It's been a pleasure. Let me just have a quick look at my notes.
While Cameron does that, I'll just say I've just dropped a link to his channel in the description for this video, so make sure you go over and subscribe to Cameron's channel. I know he's got big plans for 2021, but even looking back at his old content, he's done some really great in-depth reviews on the 1DX Mark II. He's done a really great one recently on his favorite 35mm lens. So yeah, go over to his channel, subscribe. He's going to have some really exciting stuff coming in 2021. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Cameron?
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Jack. Yeah, I'm currently working on a review of the 1DX3, so that'll be out in probably a week or so. But yeah, we were talking about kind of things we would like from the camera world this year. And something that's always bugged me is that there's never been a way to monitor your camera's display accurately and with zero delay or lag through like a smartphone. So obviously, like, I love the idea of like a 5-inch monitor. And I've got the Atomos Shinobi right here, which I think is a great monitor. But it's just like another thing to have to buy and carry around. And I think it's such a hole in the market that these pro level cameras can't integrate like the best screen we own in our pocket, which is our smartphone, right? So I think if we could find a way to implement a smartphone as an external monitor for a camera with no delay and no lag. I've kind of seen people manage it on like the Red Komodo, or I think there's also a way you can do it through the new Ronin S. But I need something
it's called the Eagle Eye, isn't it? That kind of wireless system that's working with it. So I think the lag is minimal, but like you said, it's always still there. And you've just reminded me of something that I forgot to mention. Yeah, what I'd like to see in terms of like external screens with zero lag as well, but also just better screens on the cameras, because quite often you'll get like on the A7S III, like I just bought like this £3,500 camera, and for you the 1DX is even more expensive, but they put like this really cheap 3.5-inch screen on the back, and it's like why like what Blackmagic did with the Pocket 4K was great, because it's like I think it's like a 5-inch screen on the back of there, and it's it's good quality. So I think that should be the default, really, like high quality large screens on the back, because quite often like it wouldn't even take up any extra time any extra space on the body, because a lot of the screens like have these massive bezels around them on the on-camera monitors. So if they just kind of like push the displays to the edge of the existing kind of screen, then that would give us at least 4 inches of a screen. So I think that's a massive thing. And also professional monitoring options. So like false color, like I don't know if you use false color much on your Shinobi.
Yeah, I don't use it all that much, but I should teach myself to use exposure tools for the better, I think. But yeah, no, I totally agree. I think they should come stock in the camera.
Yeah, because I use false color mostly when I'm shooting people, just because I know that the skin tones need to be in like that gray area that comes up on the false color. So having, especially on like a screen that's so small on the camera, having like false color on there would be really good, because false color is great because it's so bold and it just stands out, and you can just see that, okay, my skin tones are sitting in the gray zone, which means that they're exposed correctly. So, I mean, waveforms are great and I love them as well, but I think in terms of exposing for skin, false color is the best. So having that on camera bodies would be absolutely amazing. So that's my last kind of thought on 2021. Have you missed anything? Do you want to add anything before we wrap up, Cameron?
No, I would just like to see camera developers putting more tools into their cameras and competing with each other more. Like if you look at the smartphone industry, every single year we see big leaps in new technology and new designs, new ways of doing things. But for some reason, the camera industry is just so behind that. And I get it in some ways because there's less demand. But you know, when we're paying upwards of like £3,000-4,000 a camera, I don't see why there can't be more development with software and hardware in the camera. But I'm hoping, in the next couple of years we see a bit more competition.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to leave it on. We've kind of seen 2020. There's been a bit more of that. So with kind of like Sony and Canon bringing out cameras that kind of have the specs of their higher level kind of cinema cameras, but in a smaller body. So that's kind of started. But I agree. I'd like to see them be more aggressive about it because, like you said, a new phone comes out every year, and you can be sure they're looking at their competitors and making sure they at least have everything their competitors are offering, if not more. So yeah, definitely more kind of more aggressive competition. Max says, Jack, how are you finding your A7S III? Any issues? I bought the R5, but from what I've seen, I love the way the A7S looks. So yeah, you're looking at the A7S III now with a black Pro Mist 1/8 on there, and I'm using the 35 1.8, so I really like that setup. I found it, I don't really have any complaints with it, to be honest. Like I said, I think we're spoilt for cameras at the moment, but I don't have any complaints. It does everything I need it to. And I actually did a live show, the last live show I did, which you can check out on my channel. We did like a hybrid of the year. So we pitted the A7S III against the Canon R5, and spoiler alert, the R5 actually won. So it was very close, but the R5 kind of edged it out in terms of hybrid performance. But I think that's only really if you're kind of, you're doing photo and video kind of in equal measure. So I do video mostly. So the A7S III has been great. And yeah, it's kind of weird. We're used to having cameras that almost have everything we need, that when something comes along that pretty much has everything we need, it's hard to find like something that they could improve. But I think we've kind of mentioned the screen quality. That would maybe be the only thing that I could improve, and an internal ND filter, but that's never going to happen. So yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good. But yeah, so Max is my brother, and he's the one who has helped me decide to go for the R5 over the 1DX3, because he shoots in a very similar way to me. And he's not really had the R5 overheat on him in the 3-4 months he's owned it. So yeah, I think, but yeah, with the A7S III though, but I think the A7S III is uncompromised, which is what makes that such a good video camera, because they put a video specific sensor in that camera. It's not having to resample the image, kind of like the R5 is. But the camera I think that will be interesting, or the camera I think most people are waiting for, is what essentially will be the A7 IV. Because having shot a lot on the A7 III, if they can implement all the great things they've made into the A7S into the A7 III, I think that's the camera everyone's waiting for. That would pretty much be the ultimate hybrid for the Sony system. Do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree. And it's rumored to have, we didn't want to go too heavy into rumors, but just mention it briefly. Like, I think it's supposed to be having like a 30 megapixel sensor, which is up from 24 megapixel on the A7 III.
Yeah.
And like you said, offering all of the kind of the menu and the ergonomic improvements of the A7S III. I think that's going to be the camera to watch in 2021. And I think it's only due to, I say only, but like 2,500, which seems like a pretty decent price for something as full featured as that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously the A7S is the better video camera still, but I think the search for like the perfect hybrid camera is and has always been my goal. And I know a lot of other people also were always looking for the perfect hybrid camera. But it looks like, yeah, the A7 IV will probably be it.
Yeah, I think that's the camera to watch in 2021. I know Canon's planning to bring out one that's kind of a higher megapixel count, but that looks very kind of photo based. I think it's the R5S or something like that. But that's going to be kind of like high megapixel photo focus. So in terms of hybrids, yeah, I think the A7 IV is going to be the one to watch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure Canon will get there with another hybrid this year as well. But in classic Canon fashion, they'll just cripple something on it that annoys us all, right?
Yeah, there's always something. There's always something. But yeah, I'm going to wrap up now, Cameron, because I've taken enough of your time. But thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for everybody watching and your comments. I'll catch you next time. And Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year.
Take care,
to you
guys.
too, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Bye.